So Kwite has responded to the allegations.
Several allegations made against me, the most serious of which being that I sexually assaulted a former friend and ex-partner of mine named Orion in Orlando, Florida on February 18, 2018. This is patently false and completely untrue. Not only did I not assault Orion, I never had any sexual contact with him in any way, shape, or form. I have a lot of evidence to share backing what I say in this video, including a recording of Orion giving a testimony of this exact interaction from late 2018 that directly contradicts his current version.
Now, before we get into the main content of this, I would like to say that Kwite does actually deny all of these and does show substantial proof of the fact that these allegations aren't true.
Okay, I'll let you buy it if you give me a kiss later.
Now, this is one of many instances that is portrayed throughout this video that is quite recurring, that basically Orion is a very sexual person. And this is something that's even shown in the Discord evidence that even Kwite brings up.
Orion used as proof of his claims is literally Orion floating and initiating the idea of us hooking up when we see each other, and my response is being unsure, then stating a reason why I wouldn't want to do it. He also cropped out the next message where he's the one to push for it even further by asking if I have condoms. You could read that as him trying to give solutions to a problem that I brought up, but I personally didn't want to continue with that discussion.
Something that you've probably already noticed throughout this video is Kwite has the receipts that Orion has refused to provide, and it adds context to why he was blocking people when asked for giving evidence.
If Orion was harassed and threatened for being in that video, I completely and harshly condemn those actions, and Orion should never have been put through that. If people out there did those things, they should be ashamed of themselves and know they have no safe harbor in my community. I have never and would never instigate or support this kind of behavior.
From watching this video so far, you can already tell that Kwite has put a lot of effort into making sure that there's evidence, that there's receipts, and that his testimony stands. For people that don't know, this video is an hour and a half. I will only be showing the bits that I find most interesting and that I think actually help with Kwite's case. But trust me, Kwite's response wasn't a rushed job.
His pushiness was also not a dynamic unique to sexual situations. Orion would often push the limits of my other explicit personal boundaries if he wanted something that crossed them. And there were times I'd eventually cave after he repeatedly asked me for it, even if I was overall uncomfortable with the request. As a lot of the time, saying no hadn't been enough up until then, and giving in would get him to stop with minimal conflict and without me having to try and explain in detail why specific things make me uncomfortable. For example, Orion said this in their Twitlonger. Kwite had a rule that I wasn't allowed to take any pictures of him, but he was allowed to take pictures of me. After promising and begging to take a few pictures that wouldn't and still haven't been posted for memories, he let me take a few before he left. Then later Orion says, I have a video with him to prove we were together at the time that I was able to post only for myself after begging him to take pictures with me because we were friends. Firstly, there was never some rule set up like that, and I didn't take pictures of Orion on that trip. Even if I had, their face was in the public and was something he had willingly shared before I ever would have taken these hypothetical pictures.
This is one of Orion's points that was easily broken down beforehand, but I'm glad that Kwite reaffirmed it for everyone.
Claims that a few months after the alleged rape, when I started gaining subscribers and making larger YouTube friends, is when I began to ghost him more often, all while he was having a BPD episode. Orion says that I eventually called to cut him off, and in that call is where I apparently made transphobic comments that in part almost left him institutionalized. Firstly, if Orion was having a BPD episode during that time, it must have been a trial and a very hard thing to go through. But there was absolutely no way for me to have known that. And again, it was barely 1 month between seeing him in February and cutting him off.
I feel like from watching this response, you can tell that just from Kwite making the timeline of events clear, that it's very easy to see what side and what actually happened.
Moments, I set a clear boundary of what I preferred that he essentially said he'd only respect conditionally. This type of insistent behavior, specifically to pay for things, aren't isolated incidents. Orion even admits he has this tendency in the same testimony I shared a clip of earlier.
And I paid for everything because I insisted that since I was the host, it was my job.
In regards to physical intimacy, the entire time me and Orion knew each other, I was the one most often expressing my hesitance on the matter, backing out because I got cold feet, or just outright denying to do intimate things with him. Meanwhile, Orion was always the one more forward about engaging in physical intimacy. Even if sometimes it was in a lighthearted context, Orion had a disregard for my personal choices and boundaries that I had expressed to them, often persisting beyond me showing clear discomfort and continuing to press even when I had directly declined the physical intimacy he would propose. My case here, as best as I can. I talked about a lot of personal things before I was ready or never planned on sharing, but I hope this has helped to give a more holistic view of mine and Orion's relationship. Truth be told, if this video gets across how I hope it does, it would only be to get back to a spot worse than where I was at before. Being called a rapist or a sex pest is a label that's probably never going to fully leave my name now because of these allegations and how far they ended up getting despite having no legs to stand on. There are several people I was friends with, or at least friendly with, who distanced themselves from me over this that I may not get to talk to again. And I can't really blame them for that. I understand why they made those choices. At one point, I made the same choice in their position. Hearing that somebody you know, even on a surface level, might be capable of one of the worst things you can do to someone else is terrifying.
I feel like there's a lot of irony in this situation, being that Orion basically switched up the events to make Kwite seem like the guilty party. And I think the most obvious one is the fact that Kwite did the exact same thing to Slazzo. I'm not saying this was deserved at all. These are life-destroying allegations, but it has gone full circle. This was an overwhelmingly good response on Kwite's part and really helped separate fact from fiction. I appreciate the amount of evidence that Kwite uses to support his side of the story, which Orion just didn't. After watching Kwite's response, I'm more inclined to follow and listen to his view of the situation rather than Orion's. But what do you think? Has this changed your opinion on the situation? Do you believe Kwite more? Do you believe Orion less? And vice versa? Comment below that all down below. But I've been your host Samuel, and I'll catch you in the next video.